Joining us right now is Oklahoma Republican Congressman Tom Cole. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Maria, thanks for having me.
How important is this today, the president rolling back these 3 executive orders?
Oh, they're extraordinarily important, and frankly, it's part of a larger pattern. Congress, working with the president's passed 15 through the House what are called Congressional Review Acts to undo executive orders and rules in the past administration. That's a record by far. And then, of course, there's the action the president's taken individually. So in many ways, the most successful part of his agenda in the opening 70, 80 days has been lifting the burden of regulation from American business.
Right, and that's been probably the headline in terms of what the president has been able to accomplish so far. That and, of course, the Neil Gorsuch confirmation. What about health care and tax reform, Congressman? The president has laid out an ambitious plan for when Congress returns next week. He said he's hopeful a number of major agenda items, including health care, can get done. Listen to what he said yesterday.
Okay, I want to get both. Are you shocked to hear that? And we're doing very well in health care. We'll see what happens. As far as keeping the government open, I think we want to keep the government open. Don't you agree?
Congressman, where do things stand on the health care bill from your perspective?
Well, first of all, I'm very appreciative that the president is aggressive and optimistic because he's been working these issues extremely hard. First, I think you got to make sure the government stays open. That's job number one. I think we'll get that done. Health care, a lot depends frankly on what the negotiations have been between the Freedom Caucus on the one hand, elements of it, and elements of the Tuesday group. And they've been talking. We've clearly made progress. We've clearly narrowed the difference. The president's been very actively involved in that. And, of course, getting health care is what opens the door to tax reform. So we'll see. We have, a discussion amongst members on Saturday before we go back. Getting both of them done in a week is a tall task. But, again, if you don't try to get it done, frankly, you won't. So I'm glad the president's setting a high bar. And, frankly, I hope my colleagues can support it. I certainly intend to vote for the health care bill that is presented, and I'm certainly going to make sure the government stays open. And then let's get to tax reform, because I think that's what sparks economic growth.
Congressman, it's Dagan McDowell. Will you get a vote on health care next week? Because that seems to be a very aggressive timetable.
It is a very aggressive timetable, and so I don't know. Again, it really depends on whether or not they've come through. Procedurally, it's certainly possible. You have to remember, we suspended the vote in the process of debate. We literally were on the floor debating. And then the Rules Committee met, approved an amendment which has to do with risk pools, which was actually a compromise between the two wings of the party that brought them closer together. So there's been the sorts of things that if there is an agreement, then procedurally we certainly can move very rapidly. There's no reason why we couldn't get it done if people agree.
And did you say you were having a conversation on Saturday before coming back coming back Tuesday?
Yeah, that's pretty normal. I mean, we've been gone for 2 weeks, so
right.
Our leadership will, get the whole membership on and tell them how they see the landscape, what they think will happen. Frankly, they'll want to listen to what members have seen and heard on the when they've been out of Washington. And then finally, I would expect some of the people that have been involved in the negotiations will give us some view of where they see things standing. So I think it'll be very helpful setting the stage for what we hope is a very productive next week.
So, it sounds like you're just talking about basically just getting a lay of the land or a landscape. It's not like you're having an actual discussion about what's going to be in this legislation. Do you have any idea what we should be expecting to see if there's going to be...
Look, I think we've got 90% of the bill right now, honestly. And you have to remember, roughly 200 members were willing to vote for the bill that we had. So most of the conference is already there. But we've got to get to 216 or 217. And we've had losses on both our moderate wing and our Freedom Caucus wing. So it's the real question, and the Speaker has had those guys talking with one another. Have you guys found a way between your differences? Most of the rest of us are there and don't need to be part of that discussion. So again, we'll see, and hopefully we've made progress. I know the president's been very hands-on the last couple of weeks. I had the opportunity to visit with him 2 or 3 days ago, and it's clear he's very heavily engaged, and I think his participation has been very, very productive.
Lee, some of what is in the newest proposal, the draft proposal, is about the limited waivers that states could apply to basically circumvent or opt out of Obamacare standards for the minimum benefits that are required, and also opt out of a requirement on community rating, which is the insurers can't charge much more for people with pre-existing conditions. But it's complicated, but there is at least a draft proposal that's out there in the last couple of days.
Is there a proposal that takes premiums down, right? Isn't that was the priority for the Freedom Caucus?
That's in the proposal, that the states opting out of these rules would have to prove that they're doing it to reduce the premiums, and they would have to prove that it basically benefits the people of the state. So I'm simplifying it to a great extent, but they would have to prove that it would reduce premiums.
But the rest of the architecture of the proposal looks a lot like the previous one?
Some of it, not all.
Congressman, you want to weigh in here, Congressman? Go ahead. Congressman?
Well, I think the discussion pretty much sums it up. I would throw in the high-risk pools that were added, again, literally the last day of the session, and that, too, would lower rates because it would remove part of the population that obviously is the most in need of health care and the most expensive to take care of from, the baseline for most people. And that, again, that pushes rates down. And we want to make sure those people get help, that there's plenty of coverage, but, that has really pushed up the cost for the average person who only needs health care now and then. Doesn't have a chronic or pre-existing condition.
Congressman, it's Mitch Rochelle. The tax reform elements that were baked into the previous draft, are those still in play as well? Because obviously that was a big part of the overall tax reform scheme of the administration.
Absolutely. Again, a lot of this is about, number one, getting good health care for people. That's the first objective, and affordable health care. But we think we can do it in ways that save lots of money. Then that money helps finance tax reform.
Right, $1 trillion, in fact. Congressman, let me switch gears to the war on terror. You're pushing for President Trump to submit a war authorization to Congress over Syria. What do you want to see at this point?
Well, first of all, I would want to know what powers the commander-in-chief thinks he needs and what the objectives are. Look, I think our main objective in Syria is ISIS. And, when you talk to the military, they don't make any bones about it. Obviously, they don't like Assad. Obviously, if he uses WMDs, as the president showed, he's prepared to act. But our main aim is to destroy ISIS. And that enemy didn't exist the last time that we had voted on an authorization, and we didn't expect to be fighting in Syria. So to me, if you're fighting a new enemy in a new place, the Constitution's pretty clear. War-making power rests with Congress, and to use it. President Obama, frankly, I think with the willingness of the Congress, basically has co-opted the war-making power. It needs to go back where it's accountable to the people, and that's in Congress.
All right, we will be watching. Congressman, good to have you.